guys, so today I'm going to be going over how to solve quadratic equations with you all. So you've got some of these on the packet that you picked up yesterday on Monday. There are 4 problems at the top of that page. So these 4 up here at the top all are quadratic equations. And quadratic equations have this basic form ax squared plus bx plus c. And a, b, and c are going to be numbers when you see these in an equation. And then x is our variable. And we want to be able to solve these equations. So we want to know what numbers could we plug in for x to make this a true statement. So to find those numbers, we use what's called the quadratic formula. And that formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. And we briefly talked about this before using the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel to help you remember the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And when we have a, b, and c in that formula, that comes from our quadratic equation. So we're plugging in the numbers that we have in our equation that we're trying to solve into this formula. So everywhere we see b in the formula, we're picking the number that was from our equation. Everywhere we have an a in the formula, we're picking that number a from our equation, and same thing with c. All right, so I'm going to break this video up into a couple of different sections. Hopefully this will help you with internet speeds and being able to watch it all. So in this video, I'm going to go over one example with you, and then I'll post some videos in just a second after this with 2 other examples worked. So the first example I want to look at with you is the equation x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. So this is a quadratic equation that we're going to try and solve since it has x squared, which is what makes it quadratic. So to use our quadratic formula to solve this, we need to know a, b, and c because those are what shows up in our formula. So this is based on that quadratic equation form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So a is going to be that very first number. So if we look for the number in front of x squared, we don't actually have anything written. And when we don't have that coefficient written out, we know that we have what we called an understood 1. So there's actually a coefficient of 1 out here in the front. So that's going to be a. B comes next, and b is the coefficient that goes with x. So b in this problem is 6. And then finally c is our constant. It's the number that doesn't have a variable attached to it. So in this example, c is going to be 5. So then when we go through and try and solve this equation, we're going to plug it in to our quadratic formula. So x equals negative b. So we do negative, and then we look at where we labeled to find b. So b we said was 6. So negative 6 plus or minus the square root of, so just filling in those signs from our formula. Next in our formula, we get to b squared. So we have to go back up here to our equation and find b, which we said was 6. So 6 squared minus 4ac. So we write minus 4 times, next comes a, so we're going to come up to our equation and find a. We said a was 1, so that's what we plug in next to our formula. And then times c. So we come back to our equation and we look for c, which we said was 5. So we're going to plug in a 5. And then finally, it's all over 2a. So we divide our entire formula by 2 times a, which we said was 1 in this problem. So the more of these you do, the more that you'll get used to actually plugging the numbers into the formula. After that, we go through and we try and simplify as much as possible. So starting with negative 6, we can't do anything to negative 6, so we're going to leave it the way it is. Plus or minus the square root of We've got 6 squared next, which does simplify. 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times 1 times 5. We can go ahead and do that multiplication. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. So 36 minus 20 all over. And then in our denominator, we have 2 times 1, which is 2. So we simplified once. We're going to go through and continue to simplify. So starting at the beginning, once again, to simplify, we can't do anything with our negative 6, so we'll leave that the same. Plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 20. So 36 minus 20 is 16, all over 2. And then at this point, now that we have one number inside of our square root, the next step to simplify is to try and simplify that square root. So the square root of 16 is actually going to give us a whole number, so 16 is a perfect square. So when we take the square root of 16 to continue simplifying, we still have our negative 6 plus or minus. The square root of 16 is 4, so negative 6 plus or minus 4 over 2. And then the last thing we have to do in this problem is actually do plus or minus here. A lot of students will stop at this point, but since we have a number right here, we can do plus or minus. Plus or minus tells us that we actually are going to split this up into 2 problems. One problem, we're going to do plus, so negative 6 plus 4 over 2. And for the other part, we're going to do minus to take care of that plus and minus. So negative 6 minus 4 over 2. Then we just have to go through and evaluate each of these. So starting with plus, negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. And then we're still over 2, so negative 2 over 2. And then when we do negative 2 over 2, or we divide those numbers, negative 2 divided by 2 gives us negative 1. So that's one of our answers to this equation. Next, we come down to negative 6 minus 4. Negative 6 minus 4 is negative 10. So we get negative 10 over 2. And when we divide those, negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So negative 5 is our other answer to this equation. So negative 1 and negative 5 are going to be our 2 solutions for the quadratic x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0.